Knowing that he was about to be exposed for his 7-year extramarital affair, this is what Daystar TV co-founder Marcus Lamb and his wife Joni said in 2010 about my guest today and her 2 colleagues.
They're now saying that unless Daystar pays them $7.5 million, that they're going to take our story that we just shared with you to the media.
You see, these 3 people that Joni shared with you, they're trying to take our pain and turn it to their gain.
Is what Marcus and Joni said true? Did my guest really try to extort from them? And did Marcus's 7-year affair really have no impact on her? Or was my guest's Daystar experience a lot like Jonathan and Susie Lamb's, including intimidation, cover-up, and even surveillance by a private investigator?
So it's almost like they double down. It's not enough to, have private investigators following you. It's not enough to have people going through your trash. It's not enough to, to have everything that Jonathan and Susie, it's almost like everything is done to the extreme.
Joining me now is former Daystar TV Director of Marketing, Janette Hawkins. In 2010, Jeanette was one of 3 women who filed a lawsuit against Daystar TV and Marcus Lamb, claiming that Marcus Lamb's 7-year extramarital affair caused her great emotional pain. Daystar, in response, filed a separate lawsuit, and in 2011, all the parties settled and everything was hushed up. And Jeanette has not spoken about the lawsuit or about what happened to her at Daystar until now. So this is the very first time that she has spoken about that. And so I feel very honored to have her on this podcast. So Jeanette, welcome. And again, just so glad to have you here.
Thank you, Julie. I'm happy to be here.
And Jeanette, just a little bit of background for folks. We first spoke, I think it was back in January. Mm-hmm. And at that point, you were waiting on hearing about some legal stuff that you were looking into. And you also weren't sure, is this something that you wanted to talk about because of, again, all of the emotional trauma that you've gone through as a result of all of this. And I said to you, Jeanette, I would just love for you to come to our Restore conference. And fortunately, because of a scholarship, you were able to come. And again, this is one of the things that I do love about the community around Restore. We had over 60 people come to the conference because of scholarships.
Wow.
I know. Isn't that
amazing.
So cool?
Yes. Amazing.
Yeah. And I understand that the conference for you was really impactful. And I haven't really heard about this from you. And I would just love to hear how that was healing for you.
It was absolutely healing. I've, for more than 10 years, have held everything inside. And it's hard to explain to family, to people who haven't gone through an experience like this. It's hard for them to understand what you've been through. And when I went there, I felt like I was amongst family. And their stories were very similar. I finally felt understood. And I was able to get healing, much like many of the women there. I've gone to many, many women's conferences, and but this conference, although it is for men and women, it was such a healing experience. I feel like there's such a huge need. And when we got to the point where women were wailing, it felt like we were almost in like a funeral setting because their healing was coming from the depths of their soul. And to that pastor that says that you're in it for the wrong reasons, I would invite him to Restore next year, because you are helping to heal wounds that have been there for a long time, and covering an area that never has had attention to it. So I thank you for the opportunity. It has changed my life. I felt like for the first time, I was able to pray and feel comfortable, because I couldn't even listen to worship music. And even that was a soft introduction back into worship. And So I was just on cloud nine when I left. So thank you for that.
Wow, man, does that ever warm my heart? I mean, that's the whole entire reason we started Restore. Our first one was back in 2019, but I've heard so many of these stories, and you know, the Lord just meets us when we come to him. And especially, I mean, this is a group that has been so beaten up by people claiming to be Christians, claiming to be pastors. And I say claiming, they may have the title of pastor, but they're not shepherding, or they wouldn't be wounding the sheep. So, wow, that makes me so heartened. I'm so glad to hear that. And again, we're gonna dive into again what caused so much of your pain and your heartache. And I appreciate you being willing to do this. But I'm so glad that you're able to talk about it from a point of a little more healing and that kind of restoration, because that makes a huge difference. And I know you're under some legal stipulations. The lawsuit that you settled with Daystar, you had to sign an NDA, so we're going to tread carefully. Although, what's a beautiful thing is that all these documents are public, so I'm able to read a lot of them, and I will be doing that. But before I do, there's something that I think a lot of people, you're saying a lot of people don't understand. One of the things I want you to help them understand, especially because Marcus and Joni were going around saying, you know, these three women who are bringing these lawsuits, our affair didn't have anything to do with them. It didn't impact them. And some people might find it difficult to understand, like, why would someone else's, you know, affair impact you? I know a little bit of your background. You were, for a very, very long time, in the secular media and had a really promising career in secular media, and you gave that up to come to Daystar. And I believe you went from a salary of like $250K to like $80,000 to come to Daystar. Is that right?
Yes, it was a huge cut. And I did it because I felt like the Lord had just given me my career, and it happened so fast. And I wanted to give something back to his kingdom. So when that opportunity came up, it was great. And I knew that I was going to take a pay cut. I was coming from San Francisco. That was the cost of living is higher there, but I was happy to do that.
Wow. And I think people don't realize the sacrifice people often make. And here you sacrificed, believing that you're coming into a ministry that's going to further the kingdom of God, coming into a ministry where you trust the leaders. And in fact, Marcus and Joni, for you, I mean, you became a Christian when you were like 20, right? Like as an adult.
Correct. I was raised Catholic, and the Lord just always put people in my life to tell me about him and to finally bring me to giving my heart to the Lord. And it's funny because he did that with all of my siblings as well. And so, yes, it was later for me, but I jumped in it head first. And I just covered myself in as much learning as I could, and with mentors that were spiritual mentors and great examples, because I had a great childhood, but just having people who walk with the Lord daily in your life is really, it just is like a shiny beacon. So, that was important to me, was to have mentors.
And so Marcus and Joni, for you, I mean, coming in, you didn't have any reason not to think of them as spiritual mentors. They had this, huge platform. So you really looked up to them, not just as your boss, but as your spiritual leaders. Would that be accurate?
Yes, very accurate. And Julie, before we go any further, I probably should read the legal statement from my attorney, just to make sure I know. But it's no party that was a defendant in the lawsuits and or the Daystar lawsuits, or any person acting on their behalf paid any money or gave any monetary equivalent to any other party that was a plaintiff in any of the lawsuits and or the Daystar lawsuit in connection with the resolution of or in order to resolve any of the lawsuits and Daystar lawsuit. So sorry about that. It's just something that we got to get in there. But to answer your question, yes, I was excited. I didn't have any female mentors. I had male mentors, but when I got there, I was really excited. Joni, what I had seen of her, seemed on air to be, the perfect mentor. We were very similar in age. I thought she was down to earth. And so I was excited to feel like, I had some amazing mentors to look up to. And I think that's what was the most disappointing in this experience. But yeah, they were my spiritual mentors. I called them my spiritual mother and father for so long.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and we're going to read the lawsuit in just a minute, but I really wanted to establish that up front that, when it came out that Marcus was having this affair, we're talking a great deal of disillusionment. And at that point, you're still, you're about 10 years been a Christian or so, you're in your 30s. But to have someone on that level as a spiritual leader disappoint you in such a profound way is so damaging. But also when you've given up, your secular career to be here, taking this pay cut, and you asked these questions when you came in, not just of Marcus, but of Janice Smith. I know this because it's right in the lawsuit. Is this, what are your standards of integrity? And they just affirmed to you that this is what they believed and this is what they stood for. And so you believed you came on sort of fraudulent, purpose. That was a fraudulent claim that they gave to you because here he's having this extramarital affair. So that was one of the issues in the lawsuit, again, that we're going to get into. But there was another issue, and that's just the defamation. And I have some clips that I've pulled from around the time that this came out. So my understanding is the affair happened. I should say the affair became known in 2007 because some emails were discovered. And you happened to be one of the people that the person who discovered it came to. But then the lawsuit happens in 2010. So 3 years later, 2 days before you are going to file this lawsuit against Marcus and Joni. And again, I'll read it and you can hear more of the details. But 2 days before, Marcus and Joni kind of preempt the whole thing. They have a celebration program, and they use this as an opportunity, again, knowing what's coming, because they had been tipped off, knowing what's coming. They are going to now confess their affair to the world and then make some very, very defamatory claims about you and the two other co-workers who filed lawsuits as well. So it's kind of a preemptive strike, and I want everybody to hear it. So let me play that.
This is a very special program because we are going to be sharing our heart with you today. And I just want to say right at the front, sweetheart, that you and I are strong, and I think that our marriage is better today than it has ever been.
You are just an absolute angel, and I am madly in love with you, and you mean so much to me.
However, I do want to share something with you, and it is this. About, several years ago, Marcus and I went through a challenge in our marriage, and I discovered that he was having an emotional relationship, if you will, with someone, and that it had turned into an improper relationship.
I take 100% responsibility. Joni has no blame. The other person doesn't have any blame. It's all, I don't even blame the devil. It's all on me.
These are some of our most private moments, but there actually are 3 people who were not involved in what we're talking about today or affected by our marital challenge, they're now saying that unless Daystar pays them $7.5 million, that they're going to take our story that we just shared with you to the media.
You see, these three people that Joni shared with you, they're trying to take our pain and turn it to their gain. But ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to take God's money and pay to keep from being humiliated, I guess, or exposed, or exploited, whatever you want to call it. I'm so sorry. I've asked God to forgive me years ago. I asked my precious Joni, and when this first came out, I said to her, I said, honey, I only want us to stay together if we really love one another, not for the ministry's sake, not even for our kids' sake. Right. And ladies and gentlemen, I love this woman.
So, before I make some comments on that, I just want to know, back in 2010, 2 days before you're going to file this lawsuit, you hear them go on their program, one, saying, you weren't involved or even affected by their affair. And you've been going through trauma for 3 years, but also stating that you made this threat, you and the other two, your coworkers, that you're going to take their story to the media if they don't pay $7.5 million. What did that feel like to hear this? I mean, completely unsuspecting, I'm guessing at the time.
Yes.
That this is going to happen, yeah.
It really caught us by surprise. It was devastating, of course, to have something like that said, especially when it was not true. Our attorney was a prestigious attorney with a stellar reputation. Had something like that happen, I'm pretty sure his law license would have been affected. It's a federal offense, and if that were true, I would be in jail behind bars. So I know now that it was a tactic that they use. Even seeing what Jonathan is going through. And it's not unique to their ministry. I've noticed that other ministries are doing that, but it's a counterattack to get ahead of the story and catch people by surprise. But it is devastating to be on the receiving end of an untruth like that.
Oh yeah, I would guess it just felt like a punch in the gut for something like that to happen. But I do want to mention, because this was in your lawsuit, that Daystar actually complained to the Bedford Police Department and said, basically brought these allegations to them, saying that you were extorting them. And the police concluded and they issued a statement that after review of the details provided by Daystar and after consulting with the Tarrant County District Attorney's Office, there does not appear to be any criminal conduct under Texas law. That was issued, as I understand it, on December 8, 2010. The very next day, December 9th, 2010, Dr. Phil aired a broadcast, his TV show, with Marcus and Joni Lamb, where they reiterated the allegation. So the Bedford police have just said, no, there's no criminal, there's no basis for this criminal allegation. No, this didn't happen. At least the evidence doesn't support it. I'm going to play what Dr. Phil said on that TV show. But before I do, I'm just wondering, did Dr. Phil, did he reach out to you at this time to get your side of the story?
No, and that was really disappointing, because when I saw Dr. Phil shows in the past, he always had both parties there. So I was a little surprised that he only had one party and only really told one side of the story, but he did not ever reach out to us to hear from us.
Wow. Well, here is what Dr. Phil said.
Now, I understand that at the end of November, you were the target of a demand.
Yes, sir. These three individuals came forth and said, if you don't pay us $7.5 million, then we're going to take our information to the media.
So again, you guys here on national TV, they're talking about, they're not mentioning your name, but I'm guessing everybody in your world knows exactly who they're talking about.
Right. Absolutely. So, everybody at Daystar knew, and I think by then our names had been leaked out. So even though they weren't saying our names in that specific episode, people already knew who they were talking about. So that's what was so shocking and devastating.
Well, again, I have been saying I'm going to read the lawsuit, so I do want to do that. And again, you signed an NDA, as did everyone involved with the lawsuits back in 2010. So you are limited in what you can say and what you can comment. But again, this is the beauty of being in the United States and having a court system with public documents, is that we were able to get that. So again, you filed the lawsuit in 2010 against Marcus Lamb and Daystar, and this is what your lawyer wrote. On or about June 13, 2005, plaintiff Janette Hawkins was hired by defendant to serve as its director of marketing. In the process of applying for the job, plaintiff was interviewed by defendant Marcus D. Lamb and Janice Smith, who was identified as the vice president of programming, marketing, and affiliate relations of Daystar, and the individual to whom plaintiff would report if she became director of marketing. Before accepting the employment with Daystar, it was very important to plaintiff, who was and is a Christian, to determine the moral integrity of the organization and especially the individuals under whose authority she would be placing herself. Indeed, in an employment brochure, Daystar encouraged job applicants to do exactly that, quoting 1 Thessalonians 5:12, "And we beseech you, brethren, to know them which labor among you, and are over you in the Lord, and admonish you." Accordingly, plaintiff asked both defendant Marcus D. Lamb and Janice Smith about the moral standards with which Daystar was managed and the moral climate of the workplace there. Both defendant Marcus D. Lamb and Janice Smith replied and represented to plaintiff that Daystar was operated in conformity to the highest standards of Christian behavior, making specific reference to chastity, modesty, and purity, and that conformity to those standards was required of all employees. Written information provided to plaintiff by Daystar made similar representations. These representations were made by officers of Daystar in the course and scope of their employment with Daystar. When defendant Marcus D. Lamb and Janice Smith made these representations to plaintiff, they were themselves in the midst of an illicit sexual affair which at that point had been going on for approximately 5 years. They did not disclose this fact to plaintiff. Daystar offered to plaintiff the position of director of marketing, and in reliance upon the false representations by defendant Marcus D. Lamb and Janice Smith on behalf of defendant Daystar, plaintiff accepted the employment and began work, reporting directly to Janice Smith and indirectly to defendant Marcus D. Lamb. Thereafter, defendant Daystar and defendant Marcus D. Lamb himself continued to make representations about Daystar and about the marriage between defendant Marcus D. Lamb and Joni Lamb that were false in light of the ongoing affair between Marcus D. Lamb and Janice Smith. Plaintiff was an excellent employee of Daystar, performing her duties with skill and professionalism. Daystar repeatedly acknowledged these facts. In August 2007, an employee of Daystar named Terry Germany, who reported to plaintiff, advised plaintiff and another employee named Greg Brondo, who was in charge of information systems, that he had found emails clearly proving that defendant Marcus D. Lamb and Janice Smith were having an illicit sexual relationship and that it had been going on for about 7 years. In addition to many lewd statements, defendant Marcus D. Lamb wrote in one of his emails to Janice Smith that he could not wait to make her the next Mrs. Marcus Lamb. The emails also revealed the financial resources of Daystar had been used to facilitate trysts in other locations. Mr. Germany provided copies of the emails to plaintiff and to Mr. Brondo, and promptly thereafter tendered a 2-week notice of his resignation. The revelation of the ongoing and long-standing affair between two senior officers of Daystar, and indeed the two people who interviewed plaintiff and to whom she reported, was utterly devastating to plaintiff. The illicit sexual relationship between defendant Marcus D. Lamb and Janice Smith obviously violated the published statement of core values of Daystar. Plaintiff and Mr. Brando did not know what they should do, so they consulted Fred and Anna Kendall, who were experienced marriage counselors and who often had appeared on Celebration. The Kendalls advised plaintiff and Mr. Brando that defendant Marcus D. Lamb should step down from his leadership position and that he and Joni Lamb should seek marriage counseling. They refused, however, to confront defendant Marcus D. Lamb themselves and left to plaintiff and Mr. Brando the decision as to exactly how to present the information to the management of Daystar. Plaintiff and Mr. Brando decided to explain the situation to Bill Trammell, who is the father of Joni Lamb, and who then occupied a management position at Daystar. They did so and provided a copy of the emails to him. He thanked them and told them that he would provide a copy of the emails to Joni Lamb. Almost immediately thereafter, Joni Lamb called plaintiff and thanked her for bringing the affair to light, although this may also have been misleading, as the emails contain information suggesting that Joni Lamb already knew of the affair before it was discovered by plaintiff. After plaintiff and Mr. Brando spoke with Bill Trammell, Joni Lamb insisted that Janice Smith leave Daystar immediately. Daystar hastily agreed to purchase her home and entered into a sham consulting agreement under which Daystar paid substantial sums of hush money to her. Thereafter, Janice Smith moved out of state and did not render to Daystar services of equivalent value to the substantial sums she was paid. Daystar then actively deceived people, both within and outside the Daystar organization, about the reason for Janice Smith's departure. Janice Smith had been in a high-profile position and had herself appeared frequently on Celebration, but suddenly she was gone. Many people asked what had happened. Daystar and Joni Lamb in particular directed plaintiff to participate in the cover-up and deception concerning the departure of Janice Smith. This, coupled with the flagrant breach of trust described above, was intolerable to plaintiff, so she resigned her position with Daystar. The last day of her employment there was on or about May 31st, 2008. Both before and after her departure from Daystar, plaintiff experienced severe emotional trauma because of the egregious misrepresentations made to her by persons whom she had loved and respected, and because of the improper instructions to lie about the affair and the fraudulent financial transactions that ensued. Eventually, plaintiff's depression was so severe that she became suicidal and was involuntarily committed to a mental institution. As a direct and proximate result of these events, plaintiff sustained compensable injuries, including but not limited to severe mental anguish and emotional distress, as well as lost income and benefits. On November 18, 2010, the undersigned attorney delivered to a lawyer named John Terrell Lynch IV, who has a long-standing professional relationship with Daystar, a letter stating that he is representing Janette Hawkins as well as two other former employees of Daystar. On November 30th, 2010, at 11 a.m., Daystar broadcast a new episode of Celebration in which defendant Marcus D. Lamb admitted that he had been unfaithful to his wife. Various guests, including the Kendalls, appeared on the program and praised defendant Marcus D. Lamb for his transparency and the manner in which he had conducted himself. The descriptions of the affair and the ensuing events were completely misleading. The inappropriate relationship was incorrectly described as lasting a brief period of time. It was falsely represented that the other participants in the affair bore no responsibility for what happened, despite the fact that she had been a senior officer of Daystar and fully aware that the company's resources had been used improperly both to arrange secret meetings and to cover up the affair. Defendant Marcus D. Lamb falsely represented that he had stepped down for an extended period of time from preaching. During the same broadcast of Celebration, multiple references were made to three unnamed persons. It was falsely stated that these three persons had informed Daystar that unless Daystar paid them $7.5 million, they were going to take to the media the story of the affair. This was described as a work of the devil. Defendant Marcus D. Lamb falsely stated that these three persons are trying to take our pain and turn it into their gain. and stated that they were not going to take God's money and pay to keep from being humiliated or exploited. He urged his viewers to pray that the enemy will not be victorious. I said this once before when we covered this lawsuit when I was on with Lisa Anderson, who I'm sure you know, and she was a former assistant to Marcus and Joni Lamb. But the similarities between this and what happened between Ravi Zacharias and Lori Ann Thompson, I mean, the parallels are actually uncanny. A situation where she was sexually abused by Ravi Zacharias, and when she wanted to hold him accountable, he preemptively sued her and made her into an extortionist. And that became, because he had the platform and he had the power, he was able to get his entire story, his entire statement saying that she was an extortionist, published by Christianity Today. CT has since owned what they did and has apologized and is under different management. But what happened in 2017, just absolutely awful. She lived with that cloud of everybody believing that she was an extortionist. She was the one who had initiated these, this sexting between her and Ravi, that she had somehow gotten into his BlackBerry, which you can't do once you're blocked unless he gives you a code. I mean, the whole thing was absurd, and yet the entire Christian community believed Ravi. And I have to say, at the time, I thought it too, until I actually went and read the lawsuit and realized, wait, this doesn't add up. This doesn't even make sense. It's not even internally consistent. But again, because they had the power, because they had the platform, they were able to really deceive everyone else, and the Christian media went along with it. But you're seeing this play out. It wasn't the Christian media. It was the secular media that was doing this, and not even doing their job to reach out to you and get statements from you. I mean, this must have been infuriating to you. And also, you've lived with this now 15 years. This was the last word that was said about you in public. You're an extortionist.
Well, and the toughness was also, I came from secular broadcasting. I worked with news teams, and I knew how it worked. So to get a credible story, typically you do want to speak to both sides. And when that wasn't done, I was shocked. I knew why it was done, but I was quite shocked. And the other thing, Julie, that I want to touch on is, working in the secular realm for more than 15 years, it's behavior that you expect from people who are not godly, people who don't hold themselves accountable to the Lord. It's not behavior that you expect from a Christian environment or an international Christian organization. So I think I was so hurt and so confused that something like this would be done, and is still being done. And they do it to leave people confused and to have them question the intentions of the other people, because it softens and it takes away from them being exposed and the behavior, the actions that they've done. So it's heartbreaking that this isn't unique. It's a tactic that's used by other ministries. And the reason that it's used, because it can devastate somebody's career and life, as it did for me.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that. But a couple things I want to just note. Marcus tries to make it sound like he's on the high ground when he is on Celebration there with Joni, and he's saying, we're not going to use the Lord's money to pay these extortionists, basically. When you're hearing that, while at the same time, according to the lawsuit, you say that he used Daystar money to pay for trysts with Jana Smith. He used Daystar money to basically have her go away and stay away. And she has, just vanished into thin air. Like, nobody's heard anything from Jana Smith this whole time. There's also, in this suit, the fact that you first went to Fred and Anna Kendall. And Fred and Anna Kendall, if someone saw a picture, which you will, you'll see video of her in just a minute, but she is the one that many have come to know as Redwig, because with this whole story with Jonathan and Susie Lamb, again, for those who aren't familiar with it, I just encourage you to go to julieroys.com, look under investigations, Daystar, and you can read all about it. I mean, this has been a huge story that we've been covering, but Jonathan, former vice president of Daystar, his wife, Susie Lamb, brought allegations that Joni and Marcus, when he was alive, again, he passed away in 2021, but that they had covered up the essay of their daughter, which is their granddaughter, Marcus and Joni's granddaughter. Just absolutely shocking, but also of other things, including Joni's marriage to Doug Weiss after Marcus passed away, and the fact that Doug seemed to have just gotten rid of his wife of 30 years to marry her, which isn't really very biblically sound. But again, Redwig, Anna Kendall, is one that showed up on this video of Joni and her other Table Talk, which is a show that she has, Table Talk there at Daystar, defending her, but under the guise of asking her hard questions. And Ray Curry, our buddy Ray Curry, who you know too, right? I mean, you guys hung out at Restore.
I did. I love him.
Oh, who doesn't? I mean, he's such a great guy. And he's so mild-mannered in person.
Really?
That's what was, really mild-mannered. Like, you think he's going to be just this firebrand, because he is on his podcast, but he's really mild-mannered, such a sweet man. But he pointed out that Redwig, Anna Kendall, in supposedly asking these hard questions, was really, sounds like she had been fed what to say and was saying things that she had no way of knowing.
Listen to this part. It's going to kind of give it away.
I don't even know if he actually saw anything because he had his back to her.
Did you hear that? If your ears are quick, she don't know if he even was able to see anything. And then the red wig, let me play it again. Red wig at the end. Listen to what she said.
I don't even know if he actually saw anything because he had his back to her.
How you know that, red wig? Nobody told you on the show. You getting ahead of the script, red wig. You getting ahead of the script. You wasn't supposed to say that yet. Other words, red wig is so eager to be a ride or die that she said, Joni, I'm going to just throw in something in there. I'm going to just say his back was turned to her. His back was turned to her. You wasn't there, red wig. But somehow, you know his back was turned to her. Brothers and sisters, Joni is telling Pete's side of the story. That's all this is.
Anna, knowing her history, that she and her husband were the ones you went to first, and you asked them to do something. They said Marcus should step down from Daystar. And then they're too chicken to go and actually confront Marcus with it. I mean, this tells you who these people really are. They're too chicken. Why are they too chicken? Probably because he butters their bread, right? There is a lot of payback that they get from Daystar and from being on Daystar. And then in 2010, so 3 years later, when this finally comes out, this couple that didn't have the guts to do anything at the time and spoke so boldly about he should step down, now they go on the apology tour with Marcus and Joni, and they're on Dr. Phil. I'm going to play a little bit of their performance on Dr. Phil, which actually has some clips from some other program that they're on as well. But we'll play this, and then I'd like your thoughts about it.
Well, Marcus had this affair several years ago, and when Joni confronted him, they reached out to Fred and Anna Kendall.
Now, what I was looking for in Marcus, would he be transparent?
He opened up immediately. He was totally transparent.
Did these guys get real when they came in?
Yes. Well, the first thing I wanted to find out right away was, were they willing to work at it?
So some of the rest of that was that, he goes on to say how repentant Marcus was. And then he basically, this is the narrative that was put forth, is that it was actually Fred Kendall's. It was his suggestion that Marcus shouldn't go forward, shouldn't tell anybody about it, because if he did, then, you know, they wouldn't be able to heal. And that was their excuse for why this was buried for 3 years. But again, they're completely in his corner at this point. And there's no talk about him stepping down. In fact, he said he stepped down from preaching, but you're saying that didn't even happen either.
Correct. He and Anna told us that. And they were marriage counselors. They were counselors within Daystar. So we felt comfortable telling them and possibly getting their help to, give us wisdom on how to disclose this, or to even, to let Marcus and Joni know. And they did. They had a strong stance, but they backed off very quickly. They never, I don't believe they ever confronted them. And that was disappointing as well. You know, it's just behavior that you start to see over and over. And Daystar was and is probably still run on a fear basis. And so I don't know whether, with Fred and Anna, if it was fear or if it was for other reasons, because they did work very closely with Daystar, and there were some, financial dealings. So, but yeah, it was tough to see that.
I can imagine it was, and I would think infuriating.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And the other thing that's talked about in the lawsuit is your emotional state. I mean, you ended up in a hospital. I don't want to pry on that, but I do want to give you an opportunity to talk about it if you want to.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate the question. It is hard to talk about, but what I've noticed is that that situation just put me in the darkest depression that I had ever been through. It was, my family was concerned. It completely changed my life. And quite frankly, I haven't been the same since it happened. I still am struggling and trying to get healing from it. And it's, over 10 years later. But what people don't know also is that my stepmother, who was like a mother to us, was living with me at the time, and she was diagnosed with terminal cancer and was only given 6 months. So I was dealing with a lot, just walking away from a job that I love, having to sell my house because of, situations that I'd love to get into later. But so, yeah, my whole world had changed. And the way that I dealt with stress before, I'm learning now, was to throw myself into my work. My identity was, I'm not married, I don't have children, so my entire identity was wrapped up in my job. And of course, I see now that it wasn't healthy. But when you were throwing yourself in your work, and anytime you experience a crisis and there is no work to throw yourself into because your livelihood has been affected, I think that's why it took me to a darker place. And not to mention the fact that you are in such a vulnerable, the place that you are told that you are safe and you let your vulnerabilities come out is in a church. It is with, a Christian environment. And to feel like I was betrayed in that area, the only way I can describe it to people is that I felt like I was spiritually, and that's a strong statement to make, but it's because there was nothing left. I mean, there was nothing left of me to give. And it was, like I said, the darkest place that I'd ever gone through. And I want to talk about it because I know there's people right now that are probably experiencing this, where they've just seen all the negative or been a part of the hypocrisy in the church, or maybe they're living through fear each day in their job, because that is how many of these organizations are run. And they don't know what to do. We didn't have a Julie Royce to run to. So I think that's what made it tougher, is that we all felt like we were experiencing this alone. And so my heart now, and what has come from this, is to help others that are experiencing the same thing, and to be able to let them know. And I know that's the purpose of the Restore Conference, is to let people know you're not alone. There's healing from this, and there are healthy ways to talk about this. And so that's what I, through this interview, I hope if people don't walk away with anything more, I hope they can walk away with knowing that there is light at the end of the tunnel. They don't have to go through this alone, and there are healing avenues for them. And we can help them get to that.
Oh, I love that. And it's true that, I mean, I believe these things are intended by Satan to destroy us, for sure. But it's as Joseph said, you intended this for evil, but God can work it for good. And I don't want to sound Pollyanna about it, because there's no easy way to talk about the devastation of the past 10, 15 years. There's no easy way to talk about the financial losses and all of that. I mean, all of that is real. But I have seen, and I am seeing, God restore and redeem. And it is a beautiful community that is rising up. And boy, I tell you, there's nobody who can sympathize and empathize with the pain of a survivor like another survivor who's walked through it. And I feel like even those who are coming into the space, the pastors and the therapists and all of those who maybe haven't experienced it, but wow, after hearing it and having their heart sensitized to it, then they begin to realize these people are all among us. There are so many spiritual refugees. And so I'm so glad. I believe this is sort of a secondary move of God. I've said I believe that we're a part of a move of God to purify His church, which I 100% believe. I also believe that we're a part of a move of God to restore and heal the brokenhearted, and that is every bit as important as the other. And by the way, we're in talking right now, but we're looking to come to Dallas, Texas next year. Is the hope? So. I'm hoping to have an announcement soon, but I'll just throw that out there. I hope not to have to renege on that, but things are looking really good right now for that.
Yeah.
I just want to wrap up the lawsuit, and then I want to talk about things outside of the lawsuit, because there's a lot to talk about on that end as well. You've mentioned that Daystar, thought of themselves as a church, and in fact, that was one of the big arguments in this whole thing. And I didn't read the whole lawsuit. Friends, you can go online and read the whole lawsuit. And in fact, we'll post the whole lawsuit on our website at this podcast. We'll actually post the whole thing so people can go and read the whole entire thing. And a lot of it that I didn't read deals with the defamation and, the Dr. Phil show, the things that were said there and on Celebration. Also, Robin Roberts had them on Good Morning America and called you guys blackmailers. And so that's all there. But one of the arguments in the court documents, it's not actually in the lawsuit itself, but in some of the replies to it, is that Daystar said they're a church. They're a church. And so since they're a church, they claim sort of a religious immunity and that the state can't mess with them. And what's so amazing to me is they keep claiming this church status, and yet from everything I've seen, this place runs like a business. It has this churchy veneer, but when it comes right down to it, it's, the almighty dollar that this thing is all about. It's about making money, just like a business. From what you observed, is it a church or a business?
It's definitely a business. It's a family business. And, what people don't realize is they bring people like me from the secular realm in because they start to look at it as a product. You are a product. And what's the best way? Let's get research. What's the best way that we can reach them with the product and in raising money? And so we go through it like with, much like we would in the secular realm, with surgical precision to know the areas, the cities to go to where they could get the most response and where they could get the most, see the most financial return. So it's sad, and people don't realize that you're watching your TV at home, but on the other side, it operates as a business to the point where there is surgical precision to how to market to those people, and it's all about financial gain, and that is a scary place to be, and it's very dangerous. So I think it's important for people to know that.
Wow. I mean, it's so wicked. It's more wicked than the wickedness in the world because, again, it's done in the name of God, and it uses what is most personal, most meaningful to us as human beings, which is our relationship with God, and uses that as a means to manipulate us. I mean, I just can't think of anything more evil than that.
Right. And it's done with no fear of the Lord. They don't fear God. It's almost like some of these organizations live two completely different lives. And I went in looking at it from rose-colored glasses. I was actually warned by some of my secular colleagues. And they said it would be career suicide because, they operate in such a different realm, and I had no idea that would be prophetic. But yeah, there's no accountability, and that's the tough thing too. Is I look at it differently now. I look at all the red flags. If it's family owned and operated, and family lives on or is on the board, that's a huge red flag to me now. And so there's different things that I look at going into even my own church.
Mm-hmm. And I wish more people would do that. I wish more people, and if if I want to just really, really just urge people listening that if you're thinking of giving to an organization, if you're thinking of getting involved, look up their 990, which is what every nonprofit in the U.S. has to file, telling the top wages of their top wage earners, saying who's on the board and everything, except for religious nonprofits and churches who claim the exemption. We're a religious nonprofit. We don't claim the exemption. We 100% file our 990s and disclose all of that stuff because I wouldn't expect anybody to give me money if I don't disclose it. But I mean, this whole entire time, they're not disclosing who's on the board. And then you find out the board is Joni, Jonathan, her son, and one other person, this Tom Callender, who, we've seen what he's made of by some of the secret recordings that Jonathan gave us and we published. But again, just really, really sad what really was going on within this organization. I want to talk too about, so one of the things that Jonathan and Susie talked about was that they found out that a tracker had been secretly put on their car, and then they started getting followed by a private investigator, which is absolutely shocking. Now we're talking not just a family business, but a family business that runs like the mafia. This is not how normal businesses even run, let alone Christian churches. Did you, and I know from talking to you that you did, experience some of the same fear and intimidation tactics and private investigators following you?
Yes, 3 of them, in fact. And it was very similar if not the exact same situation. To say that the trackers were only put in during Jonathan's era, I don't believe that that's true, because there were many times that I knew that I was being followed, and people would pop up in certain places. So I thought I was crazy at the time. It makes sense now, but yes, we were being tracked, and it's a scary thing for a female to go through. And I'm in trauma therapy, and unfortunately, that was a part of some of the trauma that I experienced. And to hear that Jonathan was going through the same thing, it breaks my heart that a mother would go to those lengths to stay in control, because it's all about control.
Yeah. Can you describe like one of the situations where you realized you were being followed, or that there was a private investigator on your tail?
Yeah. I think the best story is not so much to tell about, a private investigator following me. It was what happened shortly after I started working. I had to pay the bills, so I started working at a retail outlet in the cosmetics department. And Joni and her mother come in and made a sarcastic comment like, oh, she went from, being the director of marketing to doing this. And it hurt me, and, really, and it caught me off guard, because I would not have ever thought that they would be that character, that they would have that in them. But, so not only were they going to my job to, harass me, but they were sending other people from the organization to go in and harass me. And because cosmetics is so close, you deal with the public, that was really hard to go through. So it's almost like they double down. It's not enough to, have private investigators following you. It's not enough to have people going through your trash. It's not enough to, to have everything that Jonathan and Susie, it's almost like everything is done to the extreme. And so, to this day, I still find myself, if I'm in a restaurant and I'm talking to somebody about a church topic or something questionable, I look around to see if there's, somebody who looks like a private investigator sitting nearby, because we did experience that as well.
Wow. And you, this really kind of threw me. You said before this happened, you never really got traffic tickets or anything like that. All of a sudden, you started getting stopped by law enforcement?
Yes. And it's something that I can't prove, but it was the craziest. If I pulled my driving records, I did not have any tickets at all. I especially when it comes to driving, I'm a rule follower. But I will tell you, Julie, that in the year that was happening, I got more traffic tickets than my entire driving career or driving life. And it was the craziest thing. And, I would tell people, it's hard to believe. I would tell my family. And it got to the point where I wanted to start recording recording being followed and, being stopped. And, at one point I was talking to my attorney, and because I was on my way to see him and I was stopped, and, the police, I said, hold on just a minute, officer, I'm talking to my attorney. And he was like, oh, okay, never mind. Just go on. Just consider this a warning. But it was crazy. It got where, I thought I was crazy, but I can show you proof that in that year that we were, going through all this, the amount of times that that we were stopped. And I will tell you that during this time, Robert Jeffers' brother was the chief of police. So
Robert Jeffress of First Baptist Dallas?
Yes. His brother was the chief of police during this time. So, take it and make your own judgments, if you will.
This is a thing in the Bible Belt that I've been told, is that, again, you can't prove it, but everybody knows everybody, and everybody's going to church together, or they're kind of in the network, and this is the sort of thing that Jonathan and Susie said similar type things, that some of the law enforcement, it seemed like they've been great, but again, there's some that perhaps they wouldn't. In fact, they said there's certain ones they wouldn't go to.
Right, and that's a scary thing, because when a so-called church or an organization or a person can have that much influence over a police department or in the political realm, some of it is good, but the scary thing is that if it happened to me, it can happen to anybody. And certain things could be held against you. And that's not, that's a troubling thing.
Yeah. Well, and after you left, a lot of people would just assume, you had this stellar career in media before. You should be able to just pick yourself up and get a job. Well, one, and I know this because I blew the whistle on the Moody Bible Institute, and I know what it's like to, I had an interview about my book on family life, and they just canceled, and I've never seen this happen before, and and then you're also booked for conferences, and now you're not speaking at the conferences. You get, it's a real thing. I knew it was going to happen because I know how this worked, right? So Christian media, you were blacklisted, I'm guessing, right?
I was, yes. And even secular media, because what people don't understand is it's such a small world that you can buy and sell stations from, the same organizations. And I believe that I was affected professionally as well because of the relationships that are in television. So I believed I was going to bounce back. And I think when it was like just a reality and a slap in the face is 2 weeks after it was a week after I left, I was contacted by a huge cosmetic organization that's based here in Dallas. And they had interviewed me, I want to say at least 3 times. And they had made me an offer I had accepted. And then a couple of days later, I heard back and they said that they'd heard that I had worked at Daystar, but that I was no longer there and they needed to rescind the offer. And, again, I can't prove anything, but, I was left, heartbroken because I just thought, how can somebody affect somebody's livelihood, especially when, it's on the outside. It was a part of secular media. And I had been in secular media for 15 or more years, and I'd only worked at Daystar for 3. And, another example is I was interviewed for a marketing director position for a PBS station in San Antonio. And this was not long ago. This has only been a couple of years ago. And I had, more than one interview. The general manager of the station walked me around. Usually that's a good sign, and was introducing me to people. And the next day he brought me in to meet their operations director. And the operations director said, I see that you worked at Daystar. And I said, yeah, but that was only 3 years of my career. I've had an extensive 15 or more year career in secular media. And he said, well, I know Arnold Torres. I'm going to give him a call. And I knew as soon as that was said that I was not going to get the job. And, I don't even have to know for sure that phone call was made. But shortly after that, they said they were going to go with a different candidate. So, it's just been a slap in the face to not only be blacklisted in Christian media, but like you said, in the secular realm as well. And, at my age, it's hard to find a place where you can use your experience, because they would much rather hire, young, college individual or somebody with not so much experience. And so it really is hard. And I think the other, heartbreaking reality is that when things like this happen, you don't hear from the other pastors. I mean, there's crickets. However, they're the first to point out political injustices and call your elected officials out, but they will not say a word against each other, even when they know that it's true. I've learned that they keep each other's secrets, and that's how these ministries can do the things that they do and operate as long as they have and make as much money as they do, So it's a tough realization to come to.
Oh yeah, it's a code. It's a code, and this is part of the whole evangelical industrial complex. And again, they're all connected financially, and quite frankly, they all know each other. It's a pretty small club, and once you get kicked out, you're really kicked out. And again, part of me is like, good riddance.
Exactly.
I'm very glad to be on the other side. But the fact that this has impacted your career, even in the secular media, and you're a single woman. I mean, did I hear you say you had to sell your house as a result?
I had a house built, and I was so excited because it was the first house. I traveled so much in my secular career that it was hard to, stay in one place. But I knew that it was a chance to stay in Dallas for some time. So I had a house built, a 4-bedroom house, and I was so happy and so proud. And but I had to sell it very quickly after that happening. And what people don't see is the damage that happens behind the scenes, because you're not allowed to speak to anybody there. And so you leave friends behind. I loved my job. I mean, I was a workaholic, but I loved my job. And some of the people, especially prayer department, they are so precious. And I miss a lot of those relationships. But you are, they are told not to speak to you. And I think that's so unfortunate that ministries do that. And I feel like I lost so much, and it is part of what's coming out in my trauma therapy is I felt like I had just lost everything for telling the truth and for bringing something to somebody's attention. And, it did lead me to have a crisis of faith, and that's a hard thing to say. But I say it because I know there's other people experiencing the same thing. I've read in the comment section, of some of these YouTube stories, because there's so many churches that are operating in a place of deception. And it's something that I experienced myself. It wasn't just Daystar. It was that I saw it happening in so many other ministries. And, it can take you to a dark place. And so I want people to know that you're not alone. And, we want to hear your stories. And, that's not what should be happening. We should be supporting, each other, brothers and sisters in Christ. And, So it does take its toll on your life. You feel like Job because, it affected my finances. It affected my family. It affected my home. So many different areas of my life were touched by telling the truth. And that's been the hardest thing. And that's, I think, the reason that, I just hit a hard spot in my walk with the Lord. And now having experienced, therapy and even just going to Restore, I look back and I look at it differently. There's hope now, and I see that the Lord allowed this to happen to me so that I could help others. There is a reason why so many people are leaving the church, and it's the hypocrisy that takes place and the deception that takes place. And I think it's sad. We need to have a revival. We should be bringing people back to the church and not scaring them away because we operate in fear or deception. So that's my hope, Julie.
Well, and I think that's why we heard so much talk at Restore about Reformation 2.0. Like, there needs to be a reform in the church, like substantive reform. This is not something where you just, change a pastor and it's all going to be good. I mean, this is systemic. And the pressures and the leadership structure, the leadership training and the philosophy that have just been imbibed by the church and brought in from really the world. It is not biblical. But it's been baptized and sanctified and made sound Christian, but it's not. None of it's Christian. None of it reflects Jesus. And so we have to fundamentally change what's happening. Before you go, I do just want to touch on some of you mentioned hypocrisy at Daystar, and obviously everything we're talking about is hypocrisy, but there were some other things that you saw when you were at Daystar that were red flags for you. Would you talk about some of those? Because I think they're pretty similar to what we're hearing from a lot of other folks who have been there, and I think would probably corroborate their experience.
It's always been a soft spot or a hard place because my grandmother had nothing. She lived in a tiny little home, and she lived off food stamps, but she would give her last dime to any minister that, asked her to sow a seed in hope. And that really, really hit a chord with me when I saw some things that were happening on the inside, and that people would remortgage their homes or give money that they didn't have because they're told to, plant that seed and into healthy ground and in a place that's going to, give back to them twofold. I mean, faith is not like it's not like a slot machine where you put money in hopes of getting, 5 times a return. That's not how it should work. And so that's the area that kind of scares me. And the other thing is that so many ministries now, there are separate accounts and the accounts are blurred. And there are unhealthy things that are being done with partners' money. And I think that's extremely important for them to ask the right questions and to demand that these ministries are held accountable, and even their churches. And if they're not given the information, financial information of how every penny is spent, then that's a huge red flag, and they need to, reconsider where they go or what they're being a part of.
Yeah. And you told me about like Daystar using Daystar money to do things, personal things for the family, like pick up the kids from school.
Yes. I had an assistant when I first started, and she works for me part-time, and the other part of the day she would work for Joni picking up her kids and, being a nanny of sorts. And there is a lot of that where, station equipment is used for personal use. I know the kids were able to do projects utilizing that equipment, but yet I had to let somebody go because they had done a project or two and it was looked at as moonlighting. So that's the anger that I left with, is the hypocrisy and the lines that are blurred, in ministry funds or ministry resources, because, and it's not unique to Daystar. It happens at many, many churches where, the house cleaner or the person who cleans the organization goes to that person's home and does the same thing for them personally. There are so many lines that are blurred. It's not a healthy place to be, and legally you're getting into dangerous territory.
Yeah, although the IRS never looks into this stuff, and it frustrates the heck out of me. I wish they would, but they don't, and it just becomes political. But you said too, like Joni got a $600,000 advance on a book, and yet, again, okay, fine, you write a book and you get that money, but then she's using Daystar as her platform to promote the book, and even on the end of Dr. Phil, I didn't pull that part, but on the end, he plugs her book and gives everybody in the studio audience a copy of her book, and then also plugs the Kendall's ministry.
Yes. I mean, the craziness, I know, the craziness of that. And, the book, I mean, we've got to be honest, it's a for-profit entity, and to purchase so many copies, and this is a lot of this information is public knowledge that, many ministries buy a huge bulk of the pastor's books for two reasons: so that they can get themselves on the New York Times bestseller, and they can use ministry funds to purchase these things. And it's a for-profit entity, so somebody is benefiting on the back end.
Yeah, it's exactly what Mark Driscoll's church did back when he was at Mars Hill. It's what Dr. David Jeremiah did. It's why he got booted by the ECFA. It's why he was booted from NRB. And then, a few years, everybody forgets, and he's welcomed back despite the fact he's still not with the ECFA, and you're supposedly have to be. But, we make special accommodations for our superstars. I mean, it's just... It is disgusting, but let me just put out some action points. And I don't do this normally, but I just want to urge people, if you're working for Daystar, how can you continue working for them in good conscience, knowing this is what not just they did to you, Jeanette, but what they've done to so many people and done to Jonathan and Susie. And I know you'll lose your job. I know that's your sustenance. I know all that. But a lot of people have taken stands for righteousness. Someday we're going to, stand before God and give a justification for our life. Jesus said, if you want to follow me, you must deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. So the fact that this costs you something means that it's not, most people take it as, oh, God must not be calling me to do that, when the opposite should be true, because things should cost you something. He told us it would cost him something to serve him. And so I want to challenge you Daystar employees to resign en masse. Refuse to have anything.
Yes, I agree. Because a lot of them are probably not working in a healthy environment anyway. I know when I left, it was like a huge, sigh of relief, like the weight of the world had been lifted from my shoulders. So, and the hope in this is to get healthy churches out there to restore them, to get healthy Christian work environments, and not to be in a place of fear. Like, we've heard Rod Parsley's, the way he talks to his employees. That is not healthy. And the reason why, some of these people stay in there is because that's all they've ever done. Or it's like you said, they're afraid to step out in faith. But that is a part of Christianity. And, I will say that the Lord has provided for me. He's been so gracious. And, I do not regret anything. And, I do hope that more people will take a stance. If your viewers, I would love to call them to action as well, and to say to go to their local elected officials and demand that there be resources put in place that prevents these kinds of organizations from doing the things they do. I think there needs to be some accountability, because the self-accountability is not working. So I do think that and they're not, and the pastors sure are not holding each other accountable. So something has to be done. And I hope that they will, go to their elected officials and demand that something be put in place.
Well, I think at the very least, churches and Christian nonprofits need to stop getting this exemption from reporting their salaries, reporting what they do with the money, reporting their board members. That has to stop. There are some legal things. One other call to action, and I just want to ask everybody watching to pray that God would restore the years that the locusts have eaten. For you and for so many of the survivors of church abuse and church hurt, to really, really lean in and pray for that to happen. And I do thank God for the community that is gathering and is so supportive of each other. But I think we need to pray for each other, and we need to pray for truth and justice for Baby Lamb, for Jonathan and Susie, for employees at Daystar. And again, it goes much beyond even Daystar, but so grateful for you coming on this program today, Jeanette, and sharing so vulnerably and openly. And it's just really a pleasure to get to know you. And I hope we'll have more opportunities to do that in the future.
If I could say one thing, Julie, on behalf of, the people who watch, like I said, I think things would have gone so much differently if we would have had a Julie Royce or some of these YouTube channels are a safe place to go to. And so thank you for the work that you do. I think it's so hugely important. And there seems to be a huge need for it. I think that the Restore Conference is if it comes to Dallas, I guarantee you it will probably twice what it was. But there's just, you've filled a void, and it was a very needed void. So thank you.
And thanks so much for listening to The Roy's Report, a podcast dedicated to reporting the truth and restoring the church. I'm Julie Royce. And just a quick reminder that we are listener supported, meaning we don't have advertisers or major grants. We have you. So if you believe in what we're doing, would you please consider donating to The Roy's Report? To do so, just go to julieroyce, spelled ROYS.com/donate. That's julieroyce.com/donate. Also, just a quick reminder to subscribe to The Roy's Report on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. That way, you won't miss any of these episodes. And while you're at it, I'd really appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word about the podcast by leaving a review. And then, please share the podcast on social media so more people can hear about this great content. Again, thanks so much for joining us today. Hope you were blessed and encouraged.